Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155.
From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championship, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnaldo Leon, wishing you a good day. Hopefully you're doing well for yourself, you, your friends, your family. Whether you live in the States or internationally, you're healthy during a major time of uncertainty. I'm kind of in a good mood today because if you guys don't know, in the last podcast I was talking about Brian Caraway. Brian Caraway's mother passed away, and he wanted to go pay for funeral costs. Brian Caraway isn't a major top tier fighter. I've talked about it extensively in the past a lot, and also other fighters have talked about it, even to this day, that the income and the pay for a UFC fighter, even though UFC is the largest mixed martial arts organization in the world, UFC doesn't pay all that well for fighters who compete in the undercard. If you're not competing in the top card, then you're not making all that much. Like a fighter like Michelle Waterson, I think she made about $60K. She made about $40 to $60K coming out of her purse when she fought against Carla Esparza. $60K isn't all that much in the grand scheme of things. I understand that the average salary in America is about $68K. But you gotta think about this. That's $60K coming in her purse, and that's not including paying for a fight camp, paying for nutritional meals, paying for housing, paying for day-to-day living. You gotta go with the $60K, and then she probably fights once or twice a year. She has advertisement and all that stuff, so she makes, I think, just under $100K, which really is not that much. And Michelle Waterson is a proper journeyman veteran whose main event cards and has been in top major fights in the past couple of years, and even then she's not making all that much. So a person like Brian Caraway, who is much lower in the card, he ain't making that much in terms of income. And with her mother's passing, sadly, because of the whole coronavirus pandemic, a lot of people have been passing away. A lot of older people have been passing away, which leads to funeral homes increasing their prices in order to get a proper burial ceremony for the elders. It's very sad, really. It's very sad that, okay, a lot of people are dying. Let's take advantage of this. Let's go increase our prices. Let's inflate them so people will pay us even more money to do our service for them. That, to me, is really unethical, in my personal opinion. But so Brian Caraway, he says, okay, I can't pay for this. I don't have that much money in the first place. It would be great if the MMA community can help me out here and help pay for my mother's funeral. And all he was asking for was $12,000. He was asking $12,000. He made a GoFundMe page. And last time I checked up on it, which was 2 days ago, it was about $6,000. He made $6,000 two days ago. This has been going on since May 14. So it's been 13 days. At the time of this recording, it's been 13 days since then. His goal was $12,000. 2 days ago, it was about $6,000. And not just me, but several other sports outlets out there have been talking about extensively of Brian Caraway, from MMAJunkie.com, BJPenn.com, SB Nation, Bloody Elbow. A lot of news sites, ESPN, a lot of news sites are talking about Brian Caraway's position. So in 11 days, he made about $6,500 for his GoFundMe page for his mother's funeral. And now 2 days later, it's currently at $11,350 as of right now. I won't be surprised if by the end of today it's going to get to $12,000, which is really great for Brian Caraway. I'm happy for him, and I'm happy to see the MMA community help out a fighter. I really am. I talked about this also, that I always felt like that the mixed martial arts world is all about, it has the me dilemma, that all the fighters are looking out for their own best self-interest, which is understandable considering the fact that unlike other sporting events, Unlike the NBA, the NHL, the MLB, all those, they have like player association unions to which players, they're working together as a team, and it is best for athletes to go collaborate with one another. That's why if you look at the NBA, actually it's considered an issue in the NBA, the whole player movement issue, in that the athletes themselves have too much power, they have too much leeway in the NBA, and it's both a good and a bad in the sense that you have you got a lot of players and teammates uniting together, which can unbalance the game. You have like some teams that are 100% like that's why every year there's like 5 teams that are really good. There's like 30 teams in the NBA, 5 of them are actually good, 25 of them, they don't really matter that much. They don't. And for fighters, I would really like to see the UFC is a $1 billion organization. I would like to see a lot more fighters make a lot more money, so we wouldn't end up in a situation like this where Brian Caraway has to be like, okay, please help me out. I want to pay for my mother's funeral. Things aren't going well. Coronavirus is pretty much screwing everyone over. Please help me. I don't have that much of the bank here. And also, he's also helping out his father, and his father right now is not in the best condition also. For all we know, his father is sick, old, and handicapped, so he has to help out his father's medical bills also. Incredibly difficult, incredibly hard. UFC fighters, they don't make that much money, so I'm happy to see the MMA community be like, okay, let's help out a fellow fighter, let's help out a fighter, because we understand what problems that they're going through. Everybody's going through major issues right now. We currently have guys like Colby Covington, Chael Sonnen, like John Jones, Ben Askren when he was fighting. Conor McGregor is most evident in this. I say most of the top fighters right now in the UFC, or young guys who are like in their early to mid 20s are trying really hard to sell themselves while also putting down other people. I think one thing that has been bothersome for me as an MMA fan has been the fact that everyone is focused on the ups. It's weird. So Chael Sonnen has talked about this before, where he says the point of a promo, of a wrestling style promo, is to sell a fight, and you're supposed to upsell yourself while also upselling your opponent. But Chael and a lot of fighters have the tendency of doing this in that they upsell themselves while at the same time downselling their other opponents. Because if you guys don't, because me being both a pro wrestling fan and an MMA fan, I can see both things kind of merged together. There's some stuff about the mixed martial arts, because there are pro wrestlers who try to emulate mixed martial arts into the game. Doesn't look all that well. It just doesn't. And then you have mixed martial arts fighters who are trying to implement the showmanship from pro wrestling onto them. And one thing that pro wrestling does better when it comes to promoting its matches is the fact that both competitors or multiple competitors are given time to be upsold by the other performer, which means it's like that's why a wrestler like Ric Flair would be like, I am the best, I am the greatest, you are also the greatest, like Jimmy Garvin, you are also the best, Jimmy Garvin. Or you're also the greatest, Stan Larry Hansen. I am the best. You are the best. I am better than you, and I'm the world champion. Blah blah blah. Ric Flair is upselling his opponent as well, while also upselling himself, because all the wrestlers understand that if they could upsell their opponent, then if they were to win the match, then they themselves would be upsold even more because they defeated somebody who was sold to the fans as just a great competitor. For a lot of fighters like Tyron, what's the benefit for Tyron Woodley and Gilbert Burns, because they're the next main event coming up this Saturday? What's the benefit of them downselling their opponents? There really is no point. Tyron Woodley has this, I'm way too important for everyone else, I should be fighting the top fighters. And then he's matched up against a fighter who's outside the top 5 rankings. Why would someone want to watch a fight between a top-ranked dude and a low-ranked dude when the top-ranked dude undersells the low-ranked dude and the low-ranked dude undersells the top dude? Which means both the top guy and the lower and the out of the top 5 guy, Gilbert Burns here, neither of them are upselling each other. They don't like each other, But because they're like browbeating one another, they make each other look bad to the fans, and so it doesn't come across as appealing. It doesn't. There's a reason why Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz was so popular, because they were both upselling each other. They upsold the heck out of each other, like, you're the best, I'm the best, let's go at it. That's something that I miss in MMA, and I think a lot of fighters are missing out on when it comes to giving promos in the world of mixed martial arts. You're promoting the fight. You're not just promoting yourself, you're promoting the fight, and all because you're promoting yourself and you're making yourself look good doesn't mean you're making the fight look good. And so you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon, and I'm going to be right back here with some more MMA news, coming right here after the short break.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
And we are back. So, just a rundown here. If you haven't given money to Brian Carey for his GoFundMe page for his mother's funeral, I recommend you do. By the time you hear this, it's definitely go to 12,000. But a lot of fighters here, they don't get paid that much. So that little bit of extra money can help him out in the long way. It's also going to help out his dad. So if you haven't, go type up Brian Caraway funeral mother GoFundMe page. You're going to see the first thing popping up on your Google search. Go there, donate something as little as $5, $10. Any little helps a lot. It really does. So it is being reported in by BJPenn.com that UFC 250 among combat sports events in May and June approved by Nevada. The Nevada State Athletic Commission has approved a number of combat sport events coming up in its state, including UFC Fight Night and UFC 250. The commission on Wednesday gave the go-ahead to the UFC and Top Rank Boxing to hold 4 events throughout the May and June in Las Vegas. Arash Makazi from ESPN has the full list of the approved events below. The Nevada State Athletic Commission just approved the following events to take place in Las Vegas. May 30, UFC Fight Nights. This is going to be in 3 days. June 6, UFC 250. Potential main event of that will have to be Manny Nunes versus Felicia Spencer. Maybe. June 9, Top Rank Boxing. June 11, Top Rank Boxing. The Nevada State Athletic Commission just approved the following events to take place in Las Vegas. It just goes down over the 3 events here. The events will take place without fans in attendance. In the case of UFC Fight Night, Woodley versus Burns And UFC 250, Manny Nunes versus Felicia Spencer. Both of those cards will take place at the UFC Apex facility in Las Vegas. UFC President Dana White has been optimistic that his mixed martial arts promotion would be able to hold these events in Las Vegas despite the coronavirus pandemic still being a very real thing. When the UFC proved they would hold three MMA events in Jacksonville, Florida safely, it gave them more leverage to get the okay from Nevada to continue on with these new events. Now the UFC is back at its home base. UFC Fight Night Woodley vs. Burns takes place this Saturday night on ESPN, and next Saturday is UFC 250. Nunes vs. Felicia Spencer live on pay-per-view. The UFC event also had events slated for June 13, June 20, and June 27 at the Apex facility as well. If these two events go smoothly for the UFC, just like the Jacksonville, Florida events, the promotion could get the go-ahead soon for these other events to be approved. The UFC had previously said it would be holding events in Arizona in the event that there were issues holding them in Nevada. How excited are you in the UFC to be back running events in Nevada? I am happy for that. Things are being stabilized right now. There are currently rumors going on that there could be a second wave of coronavirus, but as of right now, those are just rumors and speculation. We're unsure about that. States are just reopening up more. That's the truth. Me living here in Southern California, we are expected to reopen up 4th of July, which I found hysterical since it's proper, like, America, hurrah kind of thing. I think we can open up earlier. California is going to be one of the more later areas to reopen up, but you know what? California could reopen up a lot earlier than this. I find it very interesting that we're going to open up specifically on 4th of July as just like a huge hurrah event. I find that really astounding. But, we got events coming up on May and June for Nevada, which means sports is making a comeback here. The National Basketball Association right now, they are talking with Disney right now in having a tournament. We're unsure how the tournament is going to be laid out, though. We don't know if the NBA season is going to come back. We don't know if it's going to go straight to playoffs. But as of right now, though, there will be basketball happening sometime in the end of June or early of July. So we've got that's really interesting. So I'm happy. I really am happy that sporting is coming back. Sporting is coming back here, not just in Nevada, but in other areas also. Once again, me living here in California, the beaches are packed. So we got the social distancing thing happening, but there's a lot of evidence out there that many states and many people just don't really care about the social distancing and are just going right ahead. Beaches are already packed. In Northern California, where my family is right now, it's a lot more better there. The counties there in Northern California is a lot less strict because a lot less people there are getting sick, which is strange considering the fact that the part of Northern California where my family lives in is mostly comprised of people who are more elderly. So, events are going to be happening at UFC 250. I am happy for that because it was about a month and a half ago. I was going on about how there were 3 UFC events that all got canceled, and then Dana White was so adamant about there will be a UFC London show. There will be a UFC London show. Without a doubt. 100%. And then, 2 days before the UFC London, it's like, oh, by the way, the card got canceled. It just astounds me. But now that we know that UFC events are definitely happening in May and June, then we can expect, we can expect things to be a lot more clear coming up in future events here because we didn't know. We really didn't. Nobody knew if these UFC events would even be going on. Now, here's the interesting part though. It's being reported that there will be more stricter guidelines for when it comes to testing. There'll be double the testing in Nevada compared to their testing in Florida. The UFC has gotten away kind of being lenient in terms of their testing, i.e., they skipped some protocols when it came to their UFC Jacksonville, Florida events. We've got commentators and we got interviewers and we got people who are interacting with the fighters. They're being really close when they really shouldn't be. UFC did break some guidelines or skipped over some guidelines as they went on to go and pull off their shows. Nevada will be a lot more stricter in that case though. And here's the thing, if the UFC can get these shows going, straight, clean, nothing really bad happens, they were able to prevent Uriah Hall versus Jacare Ronaldo Souza. And here's the thing, if that fight were to continue on, now knowing that Jacare was sick, then it could have been a complete PR disaster. That would look bad. That would look bad, and we wouldn't be having this. So thank you, UFC, for having for having your Jacksonville, Florida shows go on smoothly. And because of this, hopefully things can get back on track. The one strange note, though, is what's going to happen to Fight Island. What's going to happen? So Fight Island will still be meant for international fighters, but we've had international fighters compete in America. So what's going on here? Well, UFC files 4 trademarks for UFC SEA, including events and merchandising. So they're still going to go push forward for the Fight Island thing. UFC should be preparing for more offshore activity. On May 19th, the promotion's parent company Zuffa LLC filed for 4 trademarks related to the term UFC with the SEA. And this could be potentially related to Fight Island. Under the goods and services section of the filing, the application reads as follows: entertainment services, namely arranging and conducting mixed martial arts competitions and events, arranging and conducting special events for social entertainment purposes, entertainment services, namely providing non-downloadable audio and video recordings featuring sports and mixed martial arts via the internet, television, cable, and satellite, entertainment services, namely a multimedia program series featuring sports and mixed martial arts distributed via various platforms across multiple forms of transmission media, educational services, namely instruction in the field of fitness and mixed martial arts, providing instructional programs and classes in the fields. So it talks about more about like UFC and like how it's able to like follow trademark. Though it is unclear if the UFC, SEA, and Fight Island trademarks are related. There is also identical language on the May 19 and April 13 filings for merchandising, including apparel, promotional advertising, and towels. During a segment on the May 17th episode of Last Week's Tonight, concerning the UFC return amid the coronavirus pandemic, host John Oliver jokingly suggested several names for the UFC's Promotion Fight Island events, and the UFC was among them, with UFSEA. Well, what's very funny about that is that I'm a fan of John Oliver's. It's funny now whether or not you agree with his actual takes or is whatever, but he is kind of a funny guy. And when John Oliver was making a joke about the UFC, immediately Dana White on Twitter started sandbagging the heck out of him, and it's hilarious. And a lot of people are sandbagging Dana White about it. I think Dana White threw an insulting shade onto John Oliver, saying, "You guys are ignorant, or you guys don't know what you're talking about," blah blah blah. So Dana, I don't know if Dana was watching Tonight with John Oliver, or somebody linked him to Tonight with John Oliver. But I like the fact that Dana White is so just on point. Like if he hears something about the UFC, he's like, he's on point with it, and I love it. So you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. I am your host, Arnel De Leon here, and we'll be covering some more MMA news soon, right after the short break here. See you soon.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So, this is being reported in by Essentially Sports. Former UFC lightweight suffers the unfortunate death of his 1-month-old daughter. Former UFC fighter Sam Stout and his family suffered the tragic loss of their 1-month-old a few days ago. Stout broke the news 6 days ago on his Instagram. And on his Instagram, it goes to say, most of you already know that we lost Sydney, Love Stout, in her sleep in the night before last. We tried to save her, but it was too late. The last month was with her was the best month of my life, and this is now the worst time of my life. It still doesn't feel real. Jesse and I haven't let go of each other since yesterday, and will continue to hold on to one another for the rest of our lives. We will be eternally scared from this. We appreciate all the love we have already received from the family around us. We love you, Sydney Bean. So the Canadian Sam Stout here had a 20-fight stint with the UFC, having retired in 2015. He's currently living in his hometown of London, Ontario. He is now the co-owner of Adrenaline MMA. Known as one of the better journeymen in UFC history, Sam has racked up six fight of the night bonuses. Even today, it is a divisional record at 155 pounds, tied with Nate Diaz. Before he arrived in the UFC, the Canadian had a successful run in TKO. His UFC debut came against Spence Fisher at UFC 58 in 2006. He was originally booked to face Kenny Florian. However, Ken Flo withdrew from the bout due to a back injury. Sam Stout has a significant fan base in his nation. This was pretty evident when a fundraiser for him managed to raise the amount that was multiple times the targeted value. He himself made a GoFundMe page, similar to Brian Caraway, organized by Tara Caseta, aimed at raising $5,000 for the retired fighter. However, as of now, he has already managed to raise $29,000. And then he posted like an image of himself with his two daughters here. One of them now being passed away, incredibly sad. But we can only accept that this stuff happens, and hopefully things can get better for Stout's family there. This might not be related to coronavirus. We don't know. We know she did pass away. It may or may not be related to coronavirus. But we, as a member of the MMA community, all we can do is reach out and support him, support fighters, support their families, because in this industry, it's a really dark industry, and it's tough for these fighters to go have a financially successful life after mixed martial arts, and hopefully his family can go well. Hopefully his family can be well, and they can recover from this and become better. Who knows? This is being reported in by MMAmania.com. That Francis Ngannou confronts, terrifies Paulo Costa. Quote, everyone saw him blank his pants. Reigning Ultimate Fighting Champion, middleweight champion Israel Adesanya received heavy criticism for his UFC 240 pay-per-view main event last March in Las Vegas, where he fought against Yoel Romero. It was a very underwhelming, boring fight. A lot of people came into the fight very excited, being like, alright man, this is going to be one of the best fights ever. It's going to be a walking tank fighting against this guy fighting against one of the most exciting fighters in all of UFC. During his 5-round snoozer, the last style bender kept getting heckled by top middleweight contender Paulo Costa, who is expected to eventually get the next crack at the 185-pound title in the next few months. Potentially, we could see these two fighters fight one another in Fight Island. That'll be very interesting. Right up until the racer got shut down by heavyweight smashing machine Francis Ngannou. At my last fight, nobody wants to F with Francis. Paulo was acting up. Adesanya said when talking to Submission Radio. You know how he got kicked out? He was acting up, misbehaving, acting like a fool, and at one point, Dan Hooker told me this. It's like Paulo sacked it to Francis because Francis told him to shut the F up, that his last fight wasn't even that great anyways, and he just shut up and didn't make eye contact. Paulo Costa has not competed since his 3-round unanimous decision victory over Romero at UFC 241 last August. While it was certainly entertaining, their wild tongue-wagging brawl was ugly from a technical standpoint and marked the first time the racer has been to the judges' scorecards. He was like, "Hey Paulo, shut up. Your last fight wasn't even that good anyways." And he was like, and he just ignored him. And he didn't hear it. Adesanya continued. Everyone in the front row heard it, and everyone saw him blank his pants. So no one wants to F Francis. And I said, John Jones been around the effing game for 10 years. He's never jumped up in weight. He's not doing it. Trust me. Francis Ngannou is fresh off his very wild knockout on Rosenstrike at UFC 249 earlier this month in Jacksonville, Florida. He is hoping to get the winner of Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier, who are expected to compete their trilogy at some point later this summer. I find it very interesting that Paulo Costa, who is this jack dude, obviously walking around at about like 230, he's competing at 185. Because I'm about 240. I'm a small 240. But if I were to stand right next to Paulo Costa would look like a freak of nature compared to me, man. Because the guy is jacked to the grill. And when you have someone as huge as Paulo Costa stand next to a guy like Francis Ngannou, then Paulo Costa all of a sudden looks a lot more smaller then. And I can understand that. I can understand, one really big guy looking at another big dude, looking at a much more bigger dude. And the guy who was big compared to most people, like, kind of quieting down. I can understand that. Because Francis Ngannou is one of the most scariest fighters in all of UFC. Everyone can accept that. Francis Ngannou has more knockout power in his punching than anybody in the entire UFC. Nobody can outpower strike Francis Ngannou, which is very terrifying. Now, Francis Ngannou's biggest issue is his cardio, his technique, and his inability to wrestle. But beyond that, though, the guy will knock out anybody with one single punch. Now, can we expect Paulo Costa versus Israel Adesanya happening soon? Yes. Now, can we expect John Jones versus Francis Ngannou? Because John Jones' name has been tossed around lately as it pertains to Ngannou. Because the plan as of right now would be Cormier versus Stipe Miocic. If that fight were to happen, I think the UFC are holding off for that fight to happen before Francis Ngannou gets his chance. So before those two get squared off, Francis Ngannou was like, okay, I'm playing the waiting game. What am I going to do next? John Jones out there. John Jones has, in the last podcast I did, John Jones did talk about how he was aiming for a fight against Francis Ngannou at heavyweight. That his plan was to dominate the heavyweight division and then go up at heavyweight and fight a lot more slower and just pretty much like fight against fighters in the top 5 and make a whole lot of money. That was his goal. And then he was talking about with the UFC, and apparently, according to John Jones, the UFC gave Jones a contract that wasn't good for Jones himself. He said okay, it's not really worth it. It's not worth competing in the heavyweight division, getting a brand new contract. If I'm going to be paid, here's my guess. I'm guessing that he would get pretty much something similar to his pay in the light heavyweight division. That he's not going to make that much money extra bonus for moving up to the heavyweight division. So his logic is, okay, I can fight in the light heavyweight division, to which I know I can stomp everyone, or I can be paid pretty much similar money at the heavyweight division and compete against guys who are bigger than me, who are stronger than me, who move way differently than the fighters who I compete with at light heavyweights. It's gonna be very different. I'd love to see John Jones fight somebody in the same realm as like a Ben Rothwell, like a Mark Hunt, Derek Lewis. It would be such a different game. Because John Jones always has a size advantage against all the fighters he competes with in the light heavyweight division. If he goes to heavyweight, now we might see John Jones utilize that great grappling wrestling ability that he hasn't done in years against someone like Francis Ngannou. But sadly, according to John Jones, contract negotiations didn't fall through. Jones feels like the UFC is really strangleholding him and what he could potentially do for his career. So we might not see Ngannou versus John Jones unless Jones can renegotiate his contract yet again with Dana White and the UFC and he can make that money. That's my guess here. Now, sadly for Francis Ngannou, all he has to do is just play the waiting game. Because he's obviously next in line for a title fight for the heavyweight belt. It just has to wait for 2 other guys to fight off, and he has nothing else to do except wait for this one light heavy contender to move up in the rankings, and it's based on contract negotiation. So he's playing the waiting game. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back after the short break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
We are back. So we talked about Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou, what's going on in the heavyweight division, what's going on in the light heavyweight division. And the sad thing, though, is that I always say that Jon Jones is the greatest of all time. It's Jon Jones, GSP, and Anderson Silva. Those 3, to me, are the greatest of all time in the UFC, in my opinion. Anderson Silva now, in the past couple of years, his legacy might have been going down. But without a doubt, in my opinion, Anderson Silva is the greatest champion in the history of the UFC in terms of sheer dominance. It's him and George St. Pierre, Jon Jones, those 3. And now we go from... And here's the weird part about it. Is that we can make an argument about those 3 on who is the greatest. But we can all argue that there are a lot of fighters out there who are much more popular than those 3 fighters. Without a doubt about it, though. I can guarantee you there are more people who know who Chuck Liddell is than they know who George St. Pierre is. There are more people who know who Randy Couture is. There are a lot more people who know Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey a lot more than Anderson Silva. That's my belief on it, though. No one can argue that Anderson Silva is more popular than Ronda Rousey. You can't. And so this leads to me with an article here from MMAmania.com that with the headline being Conor McGregor lost the GOAT argument badly, but he's super rich. So, the subline over here says, is being the richest more important than being the greatest? This is coming in by Coach Kavanaugh. You can argue all day about who is the GOAT, but the greatest prize fighter in MMA history is measurable and undisputed. It's really not even close. So this leads to the 3 fighters, who in my opinion were the greatest of all time. Jon Jones, Anderson Silva, and GSP. Anderson Silva, in his current UFC record now, is 34-10-1, 22 KOs, 4 submissions, fastest UFC KO at 39 seconds, fastest MMA KO at 1 minute 6 seconds. Gate record was 6.9 million, pay-per-view record 1 million. UFC titles, he's won the middleweight belt and the cage rage belt, middleweight belt. George St. Pierre, 26-2, 8 KOs, 9 submissions. Fastest KO came in at 1 minute 25 seconds. Fastest MMA KO came in at 2:03. Gate record 5.7 million, just under Anderson Silva. Pay-per-view record 950K. Titles, he's won the welterweight and the middleweight belt in the UFC. He's also the UCC TKO welterweight champion there. Jon Jones, 26-1. That one loss, came from him defeating I keep saying Mark Hamill, to which he laid down an excessively too many elbows, and because he had too many elbows, he lost via disqualification. So Jon Jones' one loss came from his from a miscommunication with him and the referee and his understanding of the mixed martial arts rulebook. So John Jones is 26-1. In reality, he truly is. He actually is 27-0. He has 10 KOs, 6 submission victories, which is equal to GSP. His fastest UFC KO came in at 152. His fastest MMA KO came in at 14 seconds. Gate record, 6.1 million. Pay-per-view record, 860K. Titles, he is the UFC light heavyweight champion, the greatest UFC light heavyweight champion. So if we look at GSP, John Jones, Anderson Silva. Alright then, now that we know their statistics, let's look at Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is 22-4, 19 KOs. He is second behind Anderson Silva with 22 KOs. He's had 1 submission win. Fastest UFC KO, 13 seconds. Fastest MMA KO, 3 seconds. Gate record, 55.4 million. Pay-per-view record, 4.3 million buys. Titles, he was the featherweight and lightweight champion at the same time. And was also featherweight and lightweight champion at Cage Warriors at the same time. So we're looking at the statistics here. So, okay. Is Conor McGregor the GOAT? Because statistically, he's the GOAT. That's the strange part. 10 years down the line. Okay, Conor McGregor has more KOs than George St. Pierre and John Jones. He's knocked out his opponent faster than Anderson Silva, John Jones, and GSP. He has a higher gate record. Look at the second highest gate record here is 6.9 million with Anderson Silva. The highest is 55. Nearly 9 times. Conor McGregor has made 9 times as much in terms of gate record over Anderson Silva. He's made 4 times as much in terms of pay-per-view record compared to Anderson Silva with 1 million. And he's the only one here who held 2 belts. So, what's going on here? Is Conor McGregor statistically the greatest of all time? Now, despite this claim here that Conor McGregor has statistically done more in terms of economics than GSP and John Jones and Anderson Silva, the article goes on to say, despite this claim, Conor McGregor is not the greatest UFC fighter of all time. In fact, he's not even the greatest UFC fighter in his weight class. The honor goes to Khabib Nurmagomedov. Alright. So we're talking about... Okay, so let's talk about Conor McGregor relative to everyone else here. So, okay, Conor McGregor, although he has the asterisk behind why Conor McGregor will not be considered the greatest of all time in terms of top 5, or maybe even, he might be top 10. Top 5, no, I don't think so. The reason why Conor McGregor will not be listed as the greatest of all time, or outside the top 5, is because his run as champions, his championship runs were underwhelming. That's just commonly accepted. We can accept all that. We get Anderson Silva, John Jones, George St. Pierre. Those 3 are the greatest champions of all time in their respective divisions. Not only that, those 3 fighters fought in an incredibly stacked division and have fought almost everybody there. Conor McGregor, though, okay, who has Conor McGregor defeated? Conor McGregor has defeated Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway. That's always being brought up. He defeated those 2 fighters. But here's what people have to think about. Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier are better fighters now. Let's not mix up their variation of Holloway and Poirier right now compared to the variation that fought against Conor McGregor early in their UFC run. It's complete night and day. Conor McGregor fought an underdeveloped Holloway and Poirier. It's the equivalent. It's the equivalent of Jeremy Horn defeating Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell is greater than Jeremy Horn, without a doubt about that. He's a lot greater in the realm of mixed martial arts and UFC. But the reason why Jeremy Horn defeated Chuck Liddell was because Chuck Liddell was still kind of new in his fight game. He was pretty underdeveloped, and so Jeremy Horn took advantage of that. Now, Anderson Silva, I think Anderson Silva has the longest reign ever as champion. Yeah, GSP, Jones, and Anderson Silva. The three of them have the longest reigns as champions in their respective division. Conor McGregor, he won the featherweight belt. He didn't defend the featherweight belt at all. He won the featherweight belt, was then matched up with Eddie Alvarez, won that belt, and then went on to fight Floyd Mayweather. He won 2 belts from 2 different divisions, but didn't defend any of them. Conor McGregor hasn't had a single successful title defense ever in his career. And that's the basis as to why Conor McGregor cannot be considered the greatest of all time. He might be the most richest of all time. He might be the most popular of all time. But if we were to go by who is the greatest of all time purely based on their performances in the octagon, Conor McGregor's performances have been great. But his performances in the octagon compared to GSP, Jones, and Silva, night and day, they don't even compete. Conor McGregor was never a dominating champion. He's a popular fighter who sold a lot of tickets, made a lot of money, but he was never a dominant champion. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Come back after the short break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So I was discussing about Conor McGregor being called the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And he's definitely top 10. In the same frame that you can go like put a Ronda Rousey in the top 10 because they are so popular and they're so prevalent as figures in the world of mixed martial arts. There's no way you can disregard them completely. But going from that story, Conor McGregor being infamous for his trash talk and for being popular and famous, let's go to another fighter who's very infamous himself, and that is Vitor Belfort. And he's infamous for multiple reasons, one being that he is an OG of the UFC, and also he is one of the poster boys for steroid use in mixed martial arts. This is being reported in by MMAfighting.com that Vitor Belfort explains disappointing end to UFC run. I was just going through my contract. Vitor Belfort is clear when it comes to placing blame on the person responsible for his struggles in his last few years with the UFC. That person himself. Some decline to be expected for 23-year MMA veteran entering his 40s, but a 1-3 end to his UFC career that doesn't include a first round TKO loss changed to a no contest due to a positive drug test was a disappointment for Vitor Belfort. Not just because of how he performed, but because he was mentally defeated before he even stepped into a cage. According to Belfort, he simply hasn't been happy going into his most recent fights. And it's his responsibility to change that. Any competition, like I always watch Michael Jordan, that was a big lesson for me because I knew that before, when you lose the passion, the drive to do something. Look, I've been in this sport for so long, and it's like this. 2 things happen to everybody when you work too long in the sport. Belfort told MMA Fighting, you think you're underpaid like Scottie Pippen, or you are paid too much. When you're paid and they treat you well and you lose the passion, you can walk away. And when you don't lose the passion, it can still become like a company job. And I believe that the majority of the fighters today, they have to work for the company. They've got to follow what the company needs. That being said, I don't care now if I need it or not. When you lose the passion, you've kind of got to go away from the sports. I see a lot of people getting hurt or a lot of fighters just kind of going through the motions. And I'm not just talking about the organization, but also with yourself. Sometimes you need a break. You need time to reevaluate or you need challenges. And sometimes what the company needs is different than what the fighter needs. I know to make your name, to make your name, you've got to work for the company. I feel like I've done that, but the company needs someone else, and I was in another season. So I think I was just going through my contract. It's not the fault of the company. It was my fault. It has nothing to do with the company. Following his loss to Lyoto Machida in May 2018, Vitor Belfort announced a retirement that only lasted until the end of the year. Regardless, he believes he did the UFC a favor by stepping away, as he doesn't think the company should have had to worry about his status as his own passion wavered. I think I kind of violated the commitment myself, Belfort said. My fire was not there, and I was living through the other people's fires, trying to say, I'll get the fire back if I hire this coach, or I'm gonna get this guy if I do that. And I was always doing something to try and bring the fire back. In March 2019, Belfort announced that he had signed with One Championship, and the plans are currently for him to face veteran kickboxer Ale Nagalani at an undetermined date. It was important for the Brazilian ex-champ to get his priorities straight before signing a new contract, as opposed to relying on the opportunity itself to rejuvenate him. Before I signed, I had to feel that way. So I didn't sign, and I feel that way. You cannot get married to start loving your wife. You cannot have your kid say, "Oh, now I'm gonna be a dad." Listen carefully to what I'm saying. You cannot be a dad waiting for your kid to be born to say, "Okay, now I have responsibility." That decision you've got to. He's going really existential here for no reason. He goes on to say, so I recommend to everyone, whether you're in financial or marketing or any type of endeavor you're looking forward to becoming an entrepreneur, I believe success comes out of sacrifice. He started to sound like one of those pyramid scheme kind of guys who's like, if you believe in yourself, you believe in yourself. Belfort made his UFC debut back in 1997, winning a heavyweight tournament at UFC 12. UFC 250 is right around the corner. This guy competed at UFC 12. Amazing. With a pair of first-round knockouts, he speaks from experience when he talks about building a career from the bottom up, and he preaches patience for young professionals looking for instant success or fame regardless of the field they're in. When Vitor Belfort fights again, he'll join Alistair Overeem and Alexei Oleinik as the only fighters to compete in 4 different decades. It's a milestone that Belfort is excited to celebrate, and he's even more excited about the contributions he can make to MMA when his competition days are over. It's amazing. I'm a grandpa, Belfort said. I'm the grandpa of the sport. I can't wait to tell he's only in his 40s. That's the amazing part about it. You're considered over the hill when you're in sports, you're considered over the hill when you're past your prime of 32. That usually is how it is. But for the UFC, it's very different, though. We got a lot of fighters who are kind of elder statesmen. Like Daniel Cormier is up there. Daniel Cormier, look at Yoel Romero. Daniel Cormier, these fighters are not young, and they're still doing well for themselves. It's amazing. I'm a grandpa. He doesn't say, I'm the grandpa of the sports. I can't wait to tell you the truth. It's a rebirth. It's my last dance. This guy obviously has ESPN. This is going to be my last dance as an athlete. I'm always going to be involved. I always want to help as much as I can, especially in all the markets of Asia, the markets in South America. I believe in the Indian market. I want to really be able to educate kids and help coaches, help athletes, be able to create a mentorship. Oh, wow. So he goes on forever and ever in this article about life. Like, the emotional part is how to deal with fear, decisions, how to say no. And when you sign that big contract, to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do that because it's against what is right. And the third part is dealing with all the management and coaches and, but they have a passion to fight for this organization or to become world champion. So basically, they start doing whatever they can. They're valuing things of the future. And so Vitor Belfort, I'm reading this right now. I'm continuing to read forward here. Alright. Let's end off here. This is a long interview. I learned one thing. You can only speak for yourself when asked what he thought is the biggest misconception about him or his career. You can never speak for somebody's behalf. I know I've made bad decisions in the past. I did things that I'm not supposed to do in the past. I think a lot of times I was not acting the way I was supposed to act before. I realized all that. I realized if you knew me a year before or you knew me since I was a kid, the people that know me today, they have an advantage over the people that have known me for a long time. The Bible says that one day is like 1,000. 1,000 is like one day. So you can grow so much in one day, or you can decide to not grow in 1,000 days. It's your decision. And the interview ends with him saying, it's your decision, while referencing the Bible. Oh my Lord. What is going on, Vitor Belfort? And his image is him looking like Antonio Banderas with the gigantic sunglasses. Yikes. So, I'm sort of happy for Belfort. I'm kind of happy for him, right? Whatever he wants to do with his life, that's good. If he wants to go compete at one and do his best, he wants a new start, a new fresh market, compete in something that he's not comfortable in to get him out of his comfort zone so he won't stay static. Good for Belfort, okay? I'm kind of happy for him. What I'm not happy for him is that he's doing this weird midlife crisis, I'm in my 40s, panicking phase. Without a doubt. He watched the Last Dance documentary on ESPN, which, by the way, really good documentary. Really fun, good documentary. You'll get to know a lot about basketball in the 90s. You get to know a lot about Michael Jordan, how he was. But if you watch the documentary, it becomes kind of preachy to an extent. Like, it goes on, like, very philosophical and existential about the life and career of Michael Jordan. And Vitor Belfort here, he's talking as if he's like one of the talking heads in The Last Dance. Because Michael Jordan, it'll show Michael Jordan, he'll be dribbling a ball, and you'll hear a talking head being like, the mind of Jordan is like a lion. And then, like, the guy, the talking head, talks forever. That's how it feels with Vitor Belfort. It feels like he's talking like a talking head in a documentary about himself. I wouldn't be surprised if he hired a documentary crew to, like, hey man, like, do a movie on me, because my career is very interesting and all that stuff. It is, but man, don't be preachy, man. So you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back right after the short break here.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And welcome back to the podcast here. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. I am your host, Arnel De Leon. And let's end today's podcast with some Colby Covington news. Okay, so I love/hate Colby Covington. I hate the fact that he's always on character. He's always playing a character, and he needs to learn when to turn off the character aspect of things. But I also love the fact that he's super dedicated to playing a character. So it's kind of off when it's similar to Conor McGregor, where it's like, I love the guy, but I also hate that he's like so full on character mode all the time that it'd be nice to see some elements of him being human. And he sometimes shows it. I randomly saw a video where an Irish reporter was trying to get the attention of Conor McGregor, and she got his attention, and then she asked him a question in Gaelic, which is Old Irish, and Conor McGregor, for a brief second, he went from, Conor, I'm the best, whoopee. He went from super confident, I'm the best in the world, Conor McGregor, to like, oh snap, Old Gaelic, Irish, how the heck do you speak this? And then everyone in the comment section started joking about it, and everyone's referencing that Conor McGregor in that brief moment was the equivalent of a kid in school, like high school, elementary school, who was asked a really difficult question that he doesn't know. So he's like breathing heavily, looking off to the side, and you can tell off his body language that his guard is down. And then Conor McGregor went from like cocky guy to being like, how do I know Old English? Old Irish? What is this? Oh, like it was a humbling experience for him. When you see this overconfident guy kind of like being brought down a wee bit there, and it makes you kind of like Conor McGregor. Like, when he's not full on character mode and you see, like, a realistic side of Conor McGregor that's relatable, then it's enjoyable. But now, we got Colby Covington here, who sometimes hateable, sometimes lovable. What's going on here? This is being reported in by MMAfighting.com that Colby Covington confirms splits from American Top Team after being removed from team websites. So it's being reported that Colby Covington has left the building. The former UFC interim welterweight champion has split with American Top Team after training at the Coconut Creek at the Coconut Creek Gym since he first transitioned from college wrestling into MMA. Covington confirmed the move during an interview with The Score on Wednesday, one day after he was moved from the team roster on the American Top Team website. "I am a member of Colby Covington Incorporated," he said. "I am a member of Colby Covington Business, Colby Covington Team, everything. This is my team now." You can't be in a one-man team. Whatever. So Covington has been at odds with several members of American Top Team, led by Dan Lambert. And once again, if you guys don't know, because here's the problem. Dan Lambert is a pro wrestling fan, and Dan Lambert and the American Top Team did a storyline for TNA Impact Wrestling, to which it was his squad trying to overtake the wrestling industry by being MMA fans, but they're total smarks about it. It's like Dan Lambert came out one time in Impact Wrestling, the co-founder of American Top Team. He's like, "Hey guys, who won the AWA Mid-South World Tag Team Champions back in 1984? This is Road Warrior, Animal, and Hawk. You know why Hawk has this belt? Because there's a weird chipped belt design." And it's like, oh my gosh, it was like Dan Lambert is the biggest wrestling nerd there is. And it was like multiple months. It was multiple months of Dan Lambert and American Top Team, including Colby Covington, going into this pro wrestling show, getting their butt whooped in a steel cage match. It was crazy. So if you want to know where Colby Covington is getting this from, it's from Dan Lambert. Okay, you got no one to blame about Colby Covington's antics other than Dan Lambert. Covington appeared to mock the rule and said other fighters, including One Jacek, Dustin Poirier, and Jorge Masvidal, all of whom he feuded with publicly, were using it against him. "Oh, I'm a pro fighter, but I'm going to go to Dan Lambert and say, 'Hey Dan, I don't want to fight him in the cage because I know I can't beat him, but Dan, can you protect my precious little feelings?'" What the heck? "Our soldiers put it all on the line for our freedoms. You can't suppress my freedom of speech, my freedom of opinion. You can't take that away. This is the Ultimate Fighting Championship. This isn't the Ultimate Feelings Championship. Just because Joanna, Dustin, Jorge want to come to him and cry like little babies, that's not fair. I didn't want to put him in a situation where they're going to keep harping on him." Colby Covington's criticisms was cut with praise for Dan Lambert, because obviously Dan Lambert loves Colby Covington because they're both pro wrestling nerds. The former interim champion said he owed that guy everything and added the owner is still a friend and mentor. This is coming from Covington. "But I fulfilled my debts there. He did these great opportunities and we went to the top together. We won a world title, but was also able to do something for him, something that no other fighter is ever able to do, and that's take him to the White House. We had a great relationship, and I'm glad I was able to give him something back. There's no ill will or hard feelings toward American Top Team or Dan Lambert. It's just a business decision and nothing more." Dan Lambert told MMA Fighting he and Covington are good after a mutual parting and wished the fighter well in his next move. The team's trash-talking rule didn't stop Covington from taking shots at targets like BMF champion Jorge Masvidal. Masvidal almost immediately took aim at Covington. The war of words between the welterweights has not stopped since. Colby Covington claimed he never broke the rule, though a trash talk-filled interview slipped out for which he apologized. Still, he said the writing was on the wall once it was put into place. According to sources, he actually stopped training full-time at American Top Team several months ago. Now at This is from Colby. "Now, at Colby Covington Incorporated, you direct your complaints to me. You don't direct your complaints to Dan Lambert. So, Jorge Masvidal, Dustin Poirier, you've got complaints, come to me. Let's settle this in the cage." But you don't want to do that. You know what will happen. We've trained together for 9 years. Now, all the gloves are off. No matter what happened in the past, doofus Dustin, the little cuck who's out here running his mouth about my name, and he's hurt in his feelings. Okay, boy, you want to talk to the media? You're going to come beat me up? Come try and fight me. And He doesn't mean any of this, by the way. That's the funny part about this. And same for Street Judas Masvidal. You're so hard. You're a 50-50 fighter. You don't even want to fight for the title against Kamaru Usman because you're scared you're going to get exposed. So there's rumors going out there that Jorge Masvidal really doesn't want to fight against Usman, and that Masvidal wants to actually put his BMF title for contendership, which is very strange. I don't know if that's even possible, but Dana White himself has talked about it as a real possibility that Masvidal might be considered an official champion. Covington most recently fought in December of 2019 when he came up short in his bid to capture the undisputed UFC welterweight title in a war against reigning champion Kamaru Usman. Since that time, Colby Covington has expressed interest in a rematch with Usman, as well as settling a long-standing grudge with former teammate Tyron Woodley, but neither fight has been booked. Colby Covington said he's in the process of putting together a new team and said the move was the best change that could ever happen to him. American Top Team, meanwhile, remains shuttered to the general public as part of the statewide guidelines to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. What I'm getting from this also is that kind of like Tony Ferguson, where he has like his own Tony Ferguson camp. Conor McGregor has his own camp. Tyron Woodley, I think, has his own like Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley has his Tyron Woodley brand that he's trying to push for. That's not even really a thing. He likes to think it's a thing, but it's not really. So it's just Colby Covington being Colby, playing a character. Whether or not you like his character, I don't like his character, but it's hilarious when he's so dedicated to this bit. Will he fight Tyron Woodley? I don't know. Tyron Woodley and Colby Covington plays as a really selfish, greedy fighter. I don't really think so, honestly. I think Colby is just like a whatever guy. I think he sees this as an opportunity for him to play a character to get people to notice him. That's how I see Colby Covington. Tyron Woodley, he comes across as a dude who genuinely believes his own hype. Like when he's like mouthing off similar to Colby Covington, I believe Tyron Woodley believes it. If you tell me who's more egotistical, Tyron Woodley or Colby Covington? Tyron Woodley. Who's more super egotistical? Super egotistical isn't really based on truth. It's just based on perception of yourself contrary to everyone else. That'll be Colby Covington. Will these two fight? I don't know. I really don't know if these two are ever going to fight. But it's going to be a fun ride if these two were to fight because they're both great fighters. And they're also both interesting characters. They're very interesting characters to the public eye. And it will definitely be a bad guy versus bad guy fight between the two. If it were to happen, it would be fun, without a doubt. Well, that brings us to the end of today's podcast. Thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.